Here to see the artist Kelli Connell talk about her work, and after the presentation there's going to be an elaborate reception upstairs with some very expensive fancy foods that I think you'll enjoy, and an opportunity to talk more informally with Kelli and ask other questions. There'll also be a Q&A after the talk. That's going to be upstairs in the SOA lobby, and there's also a small exhibition of Kelli's work. No.
It's in the folio gallery.
Oh, it's going to be in the folio gallery, sorry. Kelli has a small exhibition of her work in the folio gallery, which is at the end of the, do we still call that the studio gallery?
Correct.
At the end of the studio gallery on the right. So you'll get to see some of Kelli's work installed, so you'll enjoy that. And the elaborate reception foods. This evening's talk and Kelli's visit have been supported by a generous grant from the Ryla T and John F. Lott Endowment for Excellence in the Arts and the School of Art. Thank you very much for providing this opportunity. Kelli is originally from Abilene, Texas, which I just learned today. I didn't know that. Kelli got her undergraduate degree at UNT in Denton and her graduate degree from Texas Women's University in Denton. She is currently on the faculty at Columbia College in Chicago. She's been awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2022. She's exhibited her work in solo exhibitions at prestigious institutions such as the High Museum, the Center for Creative Photography in Tucson, and the Cleveland Museum of Art, among others. And I think the show at the High is up right now, right? Her work has been seen in galleries, museums, and art centers across the country. She's published 2 monographs and more bibliographic entries than I could count. I tried to count them and I gave up. Her photographs are in collections of the Getty, the Metropolitan Museum, the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, the Dallas Museum of Art, the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago, to just name a few. I met Kelli when she was an undergrad, and I've observed her career over the years. I've been consistently impressed by her tenacity, her kindness, and her dedication to both art and education. So please welcome me in joining Kelli Connell.
Thank you so much, Robin.
Certainly.
Yeah, top lights.
There you go. That's it.
Is that good? Yeah. Thank you, Robin, for the invitation to come here, and also thank you, Joe, for all the work with the gallery. And it's been really great to hang out with the grad students today and to go on a tour of the greater Lubbock area. Yeah, it's been really fun, actually. So I'm going to share 3 bodies of work with you, and if I start to, I'm actually not a long-winded talker, but this is the first time I'm talking about 3 bodies of work, so if you need me to wrap it up, just someone give me a clue.
I'll do this. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just start speeding through. So the first project I'm going to talk about is called Double Life, and this work appears to be 2 people in a relationship, but it's really the same one model photographed in each scene. And what I like about working in this way is that the project can be read as either a self-to-self reflection, like different sides of the self, or you can read it as a relationship evolving, both ways. When people see this work in a gallery, they usually believe the images until they get to like the 4th or 5th one, and then they're like, wait a minute, that might be the same one person. Are those twins? Are they sisters? Are they friends? Like, is that the same one person doubled? And then it takes them a while to figure that out. What I like about that is that it sometimes when we meet someone in person, we have an idea about them, and then over time, the more we get to know them, our understanding of who they are shifts and changes. So I like that the work can kind of mirror that. So when I hope nobody feels like this today. This picture is called 4 a.m. When I make these images, I'm shooting back. When I started this in 2002, I was shooting film. I shoot digital now, but I still shoot with a medium format camera that's on a tripod. And most all the time I have a stand-in that I'm working with, and most of the time the stand-in is me. So for this image, I'm wearing one outfit. Kiva Jacobson is the name of the model that I work with. She's wearing another. We act out a whole scenario, shoot 1 to 2 rolls of film, and then we change clothes act out the scenario again. We're shooting with a self-timer on the camera, so there's no one behind the camera. And then my favorite part of the whole process is cutting up contact sheets to figure out which image on the left works with the one on the right. And then those two negatives I scan and digitally composite in Photoshop to create what looks like a believable image. It cannot be ignored that these images depict what looks like a relationship between two women. In many ways, this work explores how relationship roles shift or remain the same when two females assume the roles as both partners. My work questions identity and social constructs. It explores dichotomies like masculine and feminine, caregiver and caretaker, straight, gay, butch, femme, etc. I'm interested in the notion that identity is not fixed, but fluid, and that we can pass through boundaries or systems that society has set up. This is called Convertible Kiss, and this picture is called Getting Up. My working process allows me to externalize my internal thoughts and memories. In many ways, our thoughts are what are the most real to us. And this process allows me to bring these thoughts or internal questions to the surface. I'm interested in creating work that is subtle and quiet in tone, yet charged, whether it's like an elephant in the room like this one. This is called kitchen tension. You can kind of feel like they're just about to get in a fight, or maybe a fight happened but they're not talking, but that weight is in the air. And then other images I make aren't based on my own personal life, but things that I've witnessed in public or watched in movies or read in fiction books. This image here is called it's called The Space Between, and it's based on Krzysztof Kieślowski's film Blue, from that series Red, White, and Blue. In the Blue movie, the male character at the end of the movie comes running through the rain. He's totally wet, and he professes his love for the woman who's completely dry. And I could relate to identifying with both characters in that. So I decided to make an image as an homage. Most of these images are completely staged and very well thought out and choreographed. Kiva and I spend a lot of time looking for her clothes, my clothes, deciding location, time of day. We talk about what the overall feeling or tone I'm after is, and we talk about the actions or other props we might use. But we always keep extra clothes with us just in case. This picture is called Carnival, and we were actually driving from one location to another and passed a really small mall parking lot carnival in Denton, Texas, pulled over and made this picture on the fly. This was one of the harder ones to complete in Photoshop because the sun was setting and the tone on one of her was more red than the other. I often think that my photographs lie as documents but tell truths as images. Because I did not document these two people or two selves at the same time and place, the image creates a fiction. But because my photographs portray inner thoughts and interpretations or vulnerabilities and memories on the surface as an object, in many ways these works show something very real and honest. So Kiva and I have been working for 2 decades on this project. We're still working on this. And as my own ideas about the self and relationships have naturally changed over time, so has the content for this work. When I moved to Youngstown, Ohio in 2003 to take my first teaching job at Youngstown State, I really missed Texas in a way that I didn't expect. Like I missed the wide open space and how many restaurants you could eat outside. And so that kind of influenced some locations like this one, which is an outdoor bar slash restaurant called Sweetwater that I never would have probably thought to make a picture in if I still lived in Denton. And then some scenarios change. So the early pictures in Double Life show them playing pool or making out in a car or like things you might do in your 20s. And then here they're renovating a house, or they might be drinking wine and going to bed early. So this one is called Renovate, and you can see me here as the stand-in. And then I tried to challenge myself with what I could do with the work technically, but also conceptually. As you might imagine, when you work on a project this long, it's really hard to not hit the same note over and over and to keep it exciting. So all of these pictures, the two characters aren't meeting our gaze as the viewers. They're always in their own world looking at each other in kind of more of an interior life. But in this image called Eden, it's almost like they heard something and they're both about to meet our gaze, but they don't. And then in this image here, I feel like I wouldn't have been able to make this image in my early 20s. This image was made after I'd been in a long-term relationship for a long time. And I feel this kind of vulnerability that happens after you know someone for a considerable amount of time came through in this work. And then I did start to photograph in Chicago too. So most of the images that I just showed you were made in Texas, but I will fly Kiva to Chicago and we'll spend a few days shooting there. So this was on a balcony in Chicago. And then this was Lake Michigan is behind there. This is in that same hotel. And then this is like a 2019 image about grief. And then this one was made in 2022. And this one's the most recent, one of the most recent ones from 24. Actually, that's the collage. Can y'all see I didn't erase on the side? I accidentally pulled the collage in here instead of the real one. So that's Double Life, and I think it's important to show that before I talk about the work upstairs, which is called Oh Man. And Oh Man is a collaborative project between myself and an artist named Natalie Crick. You should definitely check out her website. She's an amazing photographer. It's just nataliecrick.com. And if you want to follow her on Instagram, it's her Instagram feed is natty-natty-nat-nat. But her working style is a little different than mine, and I think it makes for an interesting collaboration. But during the pandemic, right after the 2020 election, in the pandemic, we were really upset about the election results, and we were really worried about our country and thinking about women in particular and just the changes that were going on, and we were really frustrated. So we decided to do a collaborative project based on Edward Steichen, who's shown here. And for those of you that don't know much about Steichen, he co-founded the 291 Gallery and the Photo Secession with Alfred Stieglitz. And his early work, he made early work as a pictorialist. He lived in Paris and was a key figure in bringing modern art from Paris to New York. He was also an aerial photographer for the Army during World War I. He was the chief photographer for Condé Nast from 1923 to 38, and also worked as a freelance advertising photographer. And his main career is mostly advertising and fashion photography, I would say. But then he was the director of photography at MoMA in New York from 1947 to 62. He's known for making an exhibition at MoMA called The Family of Man. And The Family of Man was a pretty groundbreaking exhibition at the time, and I'll show you some pictures of that. And then it also came with a photography book, which is probably the most widely sold photo book of all time, I would say. But in that, oops, oh my gosh, what am I doing? So Natalie and I did a lot of research before we jumped into making our collages. We read everything we could find about Steichen himself. We found some books about Family of Man. We also read about his fashion photography. This is an image of the Family of Man exhibition, which was groundbreaking in the sense that it really broke out of traditional ways to view art. So you see images on the wall, images hanging from the ceiling, there's images on the floor. They'd make these large collages. The exhibition design was very unusual for the time. For this exhibition, 500 images from 68 countries were selected from 10,000 photographs that were submitted. The photographs showed what Steichen described as the gamut of life from birth to death, with emphasis on relationships of man to himself, to his family, to the community, and to the world we live in. The accompanying book, Family of Man, has been called the most commercially successful photo book of all time. And the exhibition created these sub-themes. And this one that you're looking at here is like that round curtain area. Shows women who are pregnant, women who are giving birth, just about to become mothers. And some of the sub-themes include lovers, childbirth, mothers and children, children playing, disturbed children, fathers and sons, agriculture, labor, household and office work, eating, drinking, singing, dancing, thinking, teaching, human relations, death, loneliness, grief, pity, religion, man's inhumanity, and thinking about death, war, and finally ending with children on a note of hope. The exhibition focused on American religion, paternalism, and the nuclear family as foundation, and a world based on the unit of a heterosexual couple. So this was an immersive and interactive design. Steichen insisted that the exhibition was created with no propaganda in mind, yet the exhibition traveled under the control of the United States Information Society, the USIA, with the organization in control of the publicity and having some control over adding or removing images based on which countries they were showing the work in. This exhibition is still being shown. It's a permanently installed exhibition in Luxembourg right now, and you can go visit a Family of Man exhibition that's still up. So the Family of Man, like I mentioned, Steichen said, should be considered one of the most popular museum blockbusters ever mounted. It toured to 38 countries. There's 9 million people who have seen it. It was bankrolled by the Rockefeller family. Coca-Cola was a corporate sponsor. The catalog has never been out of print. And I mentioned that it's already being shown in Luxembourg. And the vast majority of the exhibited photographs were taken by Americans and had already been reproduced in American magazines. The Family of Man was purchased by the USIA in 4 identical versions for global circulation. So Steichen, for this book and exhibition, had no problem with cropping other photographers' work and recontextualizing it. So I might have made a work about war, but my image might be shown in the motherhood section with the mother and son, when that wasn't my original intent. And here you can see one image on the left that's a little Japanese boy from Nagasaki, and his mother, who has coverings, all over her from war. But the image that was shown in Family of Man is actually this crop version of the boy, so you don't get the full context of what was originally intended. And this is from an essay by Ariella Azule. Lesson 1 of the Family of Man, therefore, is yet another demonstration of the infinite pliability of photographic meaning. So we felt like, since Steichen himself worked with making ads and fashion and was used to his work being out in a public arena, but also that he felt so free to recontextualize other photographers' work and crop their work and often show their work without their names by them, that kind of gave Natalie and I agency to do whatever we wanted with it. Because I don't think we would do this with any other photographer's work, but with his, we were like, okay, we're just gonna take whatever we can by this photographer and reappropriate it. So this is the cover of the original Family of Man book, and it says, the greatest photographic exhibition of all time, 503 pictures from 68 countries, created by Edward Steichen for the Museum of Modern Art. And there are essays, if you're interested, written by Roland Barthes and Abigail Solomon Didot that are really interesting, that kind of show a critical look at this work. But we started to do erasures. So this is us just coming up with the title, Oh Man, instead of Family of Man. And then we created our own color system based on kind of ripping off what the book looked like. But we used magenta, cyan, a Kodak yellow, red, blue, and a light gray and a dark gray. And then we erased the bottom text to just say greatest of all time. These are installation views of our exhibition at Silver Eye Center for Photography in Pittsburgh. And we use large wallpapers that look like color field blocks that kind of mimic what the book looked like throughout the gallery. And then this piece is on view that we'll see upstairs. This is a vinyl wallpaper collage that's in the background, and then there's a physical piece that's on the front that's framed. And I'll talk about these text pieces and how we create those in just a minute. These are just more installation views. So the book itself has several cropping mechanisms they're using as far as layout and the graphic design of the book. If you look at it, it's really kind of non-linear in its look, like it's very collage looking. So we cut out these frames, and then we would lay the frames on top of an image that was included in Family of Man to create this piece, which we call Pregnant Gaze. And then this piece is called Curator, which is actually a collage of these two photographs. On the left, there's a doctor during birth. We were really struck that the woman isn't being shown here. The baby is being shown and the doctor is being shown, but you don't see the mom. She's just kind of invisible. And then we paired that with a curator on the right to make this collage here. And this is just called Curator. Another exhibition installation view. And then we have, we made 6 flower poem pieces. There's one up in the gallery that you can see upstairs. This one here is called And Then I Ask Again. How we made these, this is a page from the Family of Man. And the original poem is by James Joyce that's included in the book. And James Joyce writes as if he's a woman writing this text. So his poem reads, and then I asked him with my eyes to ask again, yes. And then he asked me, would I? Yes. And first I put my arms around him, yes, and drew him down to me so he could feel my breasts, all perfume, yes. And his heart was going like mad. And yes, I said, yes, I will, yes. And we were kind of struck that this picture below, you can't quite tell if they're in an embrace and they're really happy and, you know, truly in love, or if she's in any kind of danger. But we started to think about what we could do with text through erasures. So through the erasures, we changed the level of agency and consent that is happening between the male and female characters. So sometimes the woman has the power, sometimes the man has the power, sometimes it's equal. But in this erasure, it just says, and then I ask again, and then he put my arms down so he could feel my breasts, and he was mad, and I. So this one feels much more violent, like she didn't have any power. But some later ones completely have the woman with a lot of power too. This one says my arms, my eyes, my arms, my breasts, and his will. This is all from the same one poem, just erased in different ways. How you see these, the text is vinyl on top of plexiglass, and so when you see it in the gallery, there's a really great shadow that happens when they're lit well. And then this piece here is called Arms Up. It's from The Family of Man. It's an image from that book, and we were kind of interested in when you erase the woman out and you can't see her expression, what you notice is all the men around her, and you notice their gestures. There's a lot of pointing and grabbing, and there's kind of these phallic beer bottles in the foreground, and you can't tell if she's really happy and dancing with them or if she's in some kind of danger. That's the real image on the right. And then this is a different Steichen image on the left that he made, but we were so struck that they're pretty similar in there. This piece is called Blackout, and it's an erasure from this image, which is just an actor and actress for a movie. Does anyone know the name of this movie? I can't remember. I think it's called Flesh and the Devil, but I could be wrong. But I just erased all of the evidence of them, and then Natalie's the one that came up with adding the color to that to make it look like it's from our contemporary times. So the other erasures are all from The Family of Man. If you notice in the bottom right corner or left, sometimes it has a page number. So if you have The Family of Man book, you can turn to the exact page number and see what the original text said. This piece is called Suits. It's in the gallery upstairs. We were interested in how many portraits of men Steichen had photographed that look pretty similar in their posing. And he was really interested in photographing great men, whatever that meant. But often they're wearing suits that are like really tight around the neck with their ties, sitting in similar poses, holding cigars or smoking or pens. So we made this Tower of Men over here. And then this piece is called Hats Off. And there's another companion piece to this that shows a woman standing by a piano that's also in silhouette. And we're talking about how a lot of our music throughout time has been appropriated through kind of stealing from Black communities or other communities, but the white singers get to perform it and get recognition for it, or installation views. This piece is called That Sinking Feeling, and it's based on this picture from Family of Man. And the meaning kind of changes when you just focus on these two teenagers in this hole. And then this piece is just called Dream USA. And then this work in the back gallery here has 3 different collage elements. This one right here has the text piece on the left says all things relative. We made one of the river pieces in The Family of Man look pink, and this is called Pink River that talks. Well, Lisa was a Swedish model, largely being credited with being the first supermodel. She actually married Irving Penn in 1950, and we were interested in the cover here in Vogue shows a woman holding a globe, but they're making sure that the United States is what we see first. So we wanted to highlight that by erasing everything to show that the US is really problematic with always trying to assert its power. This is an example of the erasure we did from Family of Man that we did 2 different ways. So on the right it says before piece, behind piece, under piece, over piece, around piece. And you can see the finished collage there. If you erase it another way, it says me, 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 all me. And this piece is upstairs. This one made us crack up so much we were dying. This one's called Pink Sun. And then this is a really large scale wallpaper piece that in the exhibition Family of Man, the only color image in the entire exhibition is this bomb piece that's going off. And you walk through all the subsections or themes, and then you reach this dark room and you see this color bomb. But when the work traveled to Japan, they didn't show the bomb image, and a few other countries they didn't show the image. The book, Family of Man, does not reproduce the bomb at all. It's not in that book. So the wallpaper we made, if you scoot up close to it, you can read the power to do great harm over and over and over in the clouds. And then on the left and right side of that, there's, this is Oppenheimer here with his students. And that's from the Family of Man book. We didn't realize it was Oppenheimer until we did some research. And then we made a wall piece. These are Edward Steichen, his delphiniums. He was a breeder of delphiniums and really proud that he could make delphiniums that were really tall. And he actually gave himself a solo exhibition at MoMA that lasted a week, showcasing his delphiniums. And so we made this wallpaper that looks a little radioactive with the delphiniums in the background. And this just says weapons and power, frustration and destruction, on and on and on and on and on. And then there was a little area that showed the original Family of Man books that people could look at. This is the outside of the gallery here. So I will hurry up through this part so we can have time for questions. But my latest body of work is called Pictures for Karis. This was a 10-year project. I could talk for an hour and a half on this because it is like crazy that I even did this. But it's the subject of a monograph that just came out by Aperture that was published in March. And it's a part of a traveling exhibition that opened at the High Museum last week in Atlanta. It'll go to the Cleveland Museum of Art in January, and then the Tucson Center for Creative Photography in Tucson. But basically it's about Karis Wilson, who was a writer, and her dad was a famous writer in Carmel, and he was a playwright too. And her grandmother and her great aunt were also really well-known writers in the Carmel community. And I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know anything about her at the time. So it's crazy that I got sucked into knowing her, because how I had learned about her was through the history of photography, and I'll get to that in a bit. But I just wanted to show you a picture of her first. So she came from a family of writers, like I said, and during the Great Depression, her parents couldn't afford to send her to college. Even though her dad was a well-known writer, he still didn't make enough money off his writing, and he also wasn't good with their finances. So she got a scholarship to Sarah Lawrence. They couldn't let her go. So she went and spent like a year in San Francisco by herself, and kind of was wild there on her own, came back to Carmel, and that next year she met Edward Weston, the famous photographer. Within a couple weeks, she started to pose for him as a model, and then they started a physical relationship, and eventually that led to them living together and going through all the stages that relationships go through, from physical attraction to comfortable companionship to collaboration, until the marriage finally started to have problems and dissolve. So she left Edward in 1945. They were together for 11 years. And so Edward Weston was the first photographer to receive a Guggenheim Fellowship, and in 1937 he and Karis went to California together, where he made more than 1,100 8x10 negatives out west, and she wrote an extensive travelogue. So their combined efforts created this book called California in the West, which was published in 1940, and it included 96 of his photographs and 20 chapters of text that Karis wrote. And this kind of shows you the manila colored or off-white are her chapters of text, and the white pages are his photographs. My book uses a similar structure. If anyone's seen my book on the edges, the pink pages are text and the white pages are photograph pages. And then more than 50 years after California in the West was published, she published her own autobiography called Through Another Lens, My Years with Edward Weston. And she was driven to tell her own story as a counterpoint to how she felt Edward and his work were being interpreted decades after his death. She was really frustrated by how he was being reduced and changed into a person that she would no longer associate with, based on how people were telling his story. So it really gnawed at her until she wrote her own autobiography. So I read those two books, and then those two books are like really hilarious. Like, her sense of humor is just so great, and I like her writing style, but I, from that, wanted to learn as much about her as I could. And I learned that her archives are housed at the Center for Creative Photography in Tucson, and so are Edward's. So I read everything there that I could, looked at different memorabilia. She was a ghostwriter for Camera-Craft. She'd write under Edward's name, help him with the writing, but it was mostly Karis who would shape those. And then in my own writing, so I basically, after I did all this research, my previous partner, Betsy, and I went out to California in 2014 to many of the places where Edward and Karis had made work together. And I photographed Betsy and also made landscape photographs, so 80 years after they did. And I realized after that first shooting trip that I needed to have text. Like, there was no way anyone would be able to know everything I'd learned about Karis and Edward without text. So I started to write. And this is just the first draft of the manuscript. But my writing talks about Karis and Edward's relationship and how it progressed from attraction to a meaningful companionship to discord and eventually Karis leaving. It also sheds light on history and how our understanding of Edward's images of Karis have been shaped and the consequences of that shaping. It also tells my story as a female photographer traveling with my partner Betsy out west. And this is just a spread from the book. The book includes my writing, but also excerpts from Karis. So you have her voice and my voice throughout the whole book. And then, as I mentioned before, so Edward Weston's pictures are within the text block on the pink pages, and then my images are on their own on the white pages. I can read you one small excerpt from Karis that I just love, if this will cooperate here. But later in her life, she was increasingly invited to give lectures on Edward and her time with him. So she in her notes for one of these engagements, she outlined her initial response to the invitation to speak for the audience. So this is her voice. No, of course not. 1, I'm not a speaker. 2, I'm not a photographer. 3, I'm not an expert. 4, I don't have theories about photography. 5, I don't even have slides. Then I thought of some yes buts. Haven't you been complaining in recent years that Edward's image was getting more and more unrecognizable? 2, shouldn't you try to correct some of this growing mythology before it gets any further out of hand? 3, why leave it to people who never knew him to furnish fanciful accounts of what they assume he was like? 4, why indeed? So that's just one example of things that I found. I know we don't have much time here, so I'm just going to show you quickly. This project's like really layered, so it's hard for me to talk fast about it. This is one of the first pictures he took of her in 1934 in his studio in Carmel. I was struck how the other women he was photographing at the time are photographed like this, like very cropped, to where you can't see you can't see who they are. And then through feminist art history and theory, usually that spins Edward Weston as having a male gaze and these images feeling a little bit violent. But the truth is, in the 1930s, when these images came out, like 1930s Carmel was a really bohemian time. And before this, women were pictured in pictorialism in very traditional ways, wearing like white gowns, holding children, being celebrated for traditional family values. So many of the women who modeled for Weston were dancers and really into movement and form, and they loved seeing themselves look like this. But he broke immediately from his tradition by photographing Karis as you see her with her head and her gesture as a person. It's interesting also that her mother, Helen, modeled for Arnold Genthe, a famous photographer, in 1908. She also modeled for several other photographers in the Carmel community. This is a picture Edward made of Karis in 1935 on their rooftop in Santa Monica Canyon. This is one of the first pictures he made with his 8x10 camera, photographing the human subject. Before that, they had all been 4x5. It just shows you it in the book. And then this is me kind of riffing off that, but also like the double life work that tries to expand our definitions of gender and sexuality, I'm trying to do the same thing in how I pose Betsy, so that sometimes she looks feminine or androgynous, or that she's allowed a lot of latitude, that she can pose like Karis or Edward or me or herself. So when they lived in Santa Monica Canyon, they would go to nearby Oceano, and Edward would make landscape photographs, and he also photographed Karis here rolling down the dunes in 1936. This is some of the portraits of Betsy are not made in our travels. When I first started to photograph her after working on Double Life for so long, so my first images of her in 2004. So from 2004 to 2014, I was photographing Betsy, and some of the images I liked, but I didn't know what they were saying as an overall body of work. I was very confused, very puzzled by it, and really pretty troubled by the gaze at the camera, through the lens to the viewer, because the double life work, they never meet our gaze. I didn't have to worry about that. And all of a sudden, when she's looking at me, she's also looking at you. And I have to think about that. And I was completely, just felt stuck, and like the problems of portraiture were so heavy on me that made me go down this rabbit hole with Karis. So anyway, this picture was taken in 2009. I also taught myself how to shoot with a 4x5. I got a Toyo 4.5 field camera that could fold up tightly in a backpack. This is my photograph in Golden Canyon, which is very different than Edward's photograph made here. So sometimes I'm using a rephotography approach like I did here. This is Edward's image in Death Valley and mine, which are taken from the same place. And then other times I'll turn my camera to the left or the right or below me based on Karis's description of what it was like being there. The image on the left was made in Death Valley, and then the image on the right is called Preston because it's loosely based off of one of Edward Weston's photographs of Preston Holder. But I also like how Betsy here has the fluidity and gender compared to some of the other pictures. This is the only picture in the series that I'm in. And then if you visit the Oceano Dunes today, in order to photograph in the places where they made work and Edward made those photographs, you have to rent like a razor scooter, like an RTE. So I had one of those helmets on, and Betsy was so excited to drive that thing, I was terrified. And what you don't see here is all the dune buggies and everything else, because I had to wait until, as soon as the camera was out, everyone wanted to do crazy tricks in front of me. But the landscape is really marred now compared to how beautiful it looked in Edward's images. And this is a picture Betsy made in Lakeside, Michigan. And then in Santa Fe, there's a part of the book, a huge section of the book is actually cut out about Georgia O'Keeffe and Alfred Stieglitz, but this is a Chama River that Georgia O'Keeffe painted often. And then this is Edward's image of Lake Tenaya. And then my photograph of Lake Tenaya. So if you go see any of these exhibitions, Weston's images from the CCP were loaned for the exhibition, so it's real Westons that you see. And they're in vitrines in the center of the gallery, and then my work's on the wall, so it creates this interesting echo that you can see between the works as you move through them. If you go to the High Museum website, you can see what those look like. I didn't put any in my talk. These juniper trees we looked for forever, and we had, I didn't know I was going to find these. Like, I actually had to email Byron Wolf and Mark Klett, who had photographed them before. And the crazy thing is, Byron remembered them in one location, and Mark remembered them in another. So it took me a while, but we eventually did find those. And this photograph in particular, I felt like I was standing in exactly the same place. It was really weird and pretty cool. But I think my work, I'm pretty loose with the need to re-photograph. I'm more interested in the idea of pilgrimage and how if, like Arno Raphael Minkkinen told me once that the best thing about a pilgrimage is you feel like someone's right there with you. So I felt like Karis was with me the whole time, and I was trying to get to know her. And it's so crazy that I was trying to get to know her after she passed away. I've never met her, but I dedicated so much of my life in trying to get to know her better. We also hiked, Betsy and I hiked to Lake Ediza, where this image was made in 1937 by Edward, to try to find this exact piece of rock that she's leaning against. It was a 7-mile hike in and a 7-mile hike out. I had no real experience hiking, and we didn't spend the night there because I was too scared of bears. So that was nuts. We did that twice, and I still don't think I found the image. But one interesting thing about that trip that I talk about in the book, this is Edward's picture, and on the same trip, Ansel Adams went with them. So it was Karis, Edward, Ansel, Ron Partridge, who was Imogen Cunningham's son, and 2 rock climbers all stayed in one tent together. And this is a picture that Ansel Adams took of Karis, like 1 or 2 days after the picture I just showed you. And so Karis here is really tomboyish. She's very comfortable wearing men's clothing. Her hair is super short. She looks kind of like a heartthrob here, I think. And we don't see her like that through Edward's pictures, but I loved that she felt as free to be able to just be one of the guys or hang out with them. And it made me see a different side of herself, which also made me wonder if there's other sides of Edward that we had never seen. And through my research, I realized he actually liked to cross-dress at parties. If they would clear out their stuff in their dining room to make a space for parties, and he'd find someone about his height. He was a lot shorter than Karis. She was 5'8", my height, and he was 5'2". And he would find someone about his height, trade clothes with them, and dance in their dresses. And he was really good friends with Marguerite Mather, who was a lesbian, and then Johann, I always can't pronounce his last name, Hagermeyer. Those four always hung out with Tina Modotti. So it was really bohemian time, and we don't think about Edward being described that way. So what I realized is what I learned about Edward through my photo history classes was being told to me through writing or stories that were told by men who were heterosexual men with their own ideas about Edward's machismo nature. But I don't think Edward was I think Edward was much more free and bohemian than we thought. And that surprised me because I went into this project not wanting to like Weston, and what happened is I realized he's just a human like all of us, and we're all very complicated people living our lives and falling in love and getting our hearts broken and all this stuff, and he's just living a simple life dedicated to the art that he loves. So she changed my mind about him, and the book goes into that even more. So their relationship started to fall apart after they went on another long trip for this Leaves of Grass publication that Edward Weston photographed all the images in, but the text is written by Walt Whitman. On that trip, Karis actually fell in love with another man, and she didn't go on with the affair, but it created a fissure in their relationship. This photograph was taken on the day that she was going to have dinner with her love interest, and she's always felt uncomfortable with this image, and I can kind of see why. It's almost like an interrogation lamp on her. The pose is a really vulnerable pose. It has a kind of a film noir, like detective vibe to me, at least in my eyes. But they did stay together, and then the war started, and when they moved back to Carmel, these were taken in point logos, by the way. When they moved back to Carmel, you start to see their relationship, like the camera to subject distance starts to get greater, and you can kind of feel the tone of their relationship changing. This image is actually taken before this, so sorry, this is in 1939. The trip I was talking about is 1941. But Chaz Bowie, who Robin knows, when I was an undergrad at UNT, we used to pore over tons of photo books on the floor of his apartment and just like look at photo books all the time. And he gave me a postcard of Karis, and it's just titled Nude 1939. I didn't know this was Karis Wilson, I didn't know this was an Edward Weston picture, but I always felt connected to that postcard. So I wanted to find where that pool was, and it's actually in the backyard of Karis's childhood home. Here you can see the lighter shade of grass is where the pool's been filled in. And then this is at their home in Wildcat Hill. Edward started to make these tableaus because during the war they couldn't travel that much. They were kind of stuck making work at home. And this is me on the property. The interesting thing is you can stay on this property. Gina Weston and Kim Weston live there. So Edward's grandson Kim and his wife Gina. And that cat is named Karis, and the other cat on the property is named Eddie. So I thought it was kind of interesting that Karis the cat is looking at where Karis used to stand. And the other inside joke for me is that Karis and Edward did work on one more book together, and it was called The Cats of Wildcat Hill. And Karis wrote all of the text for that, and Edward made all the photographs. This picture is called Springtime and made in 1943. And around this time, their relationship started to fall apart. Edward also was beginning to show signs of Parkinson's disease, and that was accompanied with severe depression. Karis thought he was upset with her all the time, but the truth is it was probably the first stages of that disease coming about. So when she left him in 1945, I think 2 months after that, he received an official diagnosis. And this is just my photograph made at that same window here. And then this is the last picture he took of her called Winter Idol. It's made in Big Sur. And I just typed in Winter Idol, Big Sur, Doug Short, because I knew that's the name of the person who owned the land. And there popped up this crazy realtor site where you can stay at this property for like $600 a night. And I emailed them and said, I can't spend that much money to stay there, and they said, and I showed them this picture, and they said, well, we'll let you come and make a photograph while the maid's cleaning before the next people come in. So you have from 12 to 3. So I found that same tree, and then after I got the Guggenheim, I wrote to them again to see if they'd let me come back and photograph. This time they said, sure, you can stay a week for free. But I actually didn't make it the whole week because they had mice, and it just freaked me out. Like, I had a mouse like crawl up the bed, like run away, and I immediately was like, okay, that's enough. But the sad thing is that tree had been cut down on accident by the gardener. So a lot of my book talks about photography's tie to death and grief, and how photographs will always outlive us, and no matter what we do, like when you know someone and love someone so much and intimately, the stories, they'll become reduced to a story and after they pass away, and there's no getting around that. And so this work talks about that. These photographs all of our photographs will outlive us, but the stories that people say are what people will kind of change or shift the understanding of who we once were. So a lot of my writing talks about that as well. I think this is the last image. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about anything. Thank you so much.
I'm curious, in double life, do you feel like your relationship, like you said, it's 2 decades so far, and there's some elements that are happening towards this end of this that you've shown today. Is there some things going on between the two of you that you feel like your friendship, your relationship is feeding into your choice of subject?
I think this image in particular, like my dad had passed away pretty early before that, and her dad had too, like within a couple of years. So we both were just experiencing like what it's like to lose someone close to you. And actually, right before I wrote Pictures for Karis, that's where that kind of came from. So yeah, this picture is more about thinking about losing someone that you love. Yeah. But this work continually evolves, and my life has changed quite a bit over the last 2 years, so I'm sure the next pictures that I make will be like really different.
I'm going to go a little Freud, and I apologize for that. But as I was looking at it, I felt like the phallus was coming through, like this. And the phallus, if you read Freud, is like unattainable, and it doesn't exist in a way. And so, like, there was something nice about how the phallus appeared when you took out the text and wrote me, and then there was a phallic thing. And so I don't know, like, I think there's something to this like unattainable masculine that comes across in your work, and like you kind of make it, because like even if you think about the book itself, like there's this weird unattainable masculine that comes across like in these and in the text. And I don't know, like, do you think that there's something there in this like weird grasping for this unattainable masculine that, I don't know, maybe there's a barrier for some women, or maybe even like men, they portray this masculine, but it always falters even, or something. I don't know. I feel like there's something interesting there with this idea that's coming across, and I don't know if I'm articulating it correctly.
Yeah,
but-
it's an interesting thought. I don't think Natalie and I think we are thinking about power and power systems as a whole, like thinking about the larger corporate America and who's in power and these billionaires that they have all the power. And both Natalie and I love men. Like, we don't have anything against men. Like, I've always been attracted to men and women. And Natalie has a boyfriend right now, so we're not angry or want to be a man, but we're very aware that in the society we live in, there's that power that's there that has really harmed many women, people of color, even other white men that don't conform to the values of the patriarchal systems that they have. So I don't feel like the work is really after like a certain fallacy, and I have been thinking quite a bit lately, like this work did make me really do a deep dive thinking about my own definitions of the male gaze and what that means to photograph another woman. And eventually I had to just give in and be more free with that myself, because just recently I've been thinking about pictures where, even pictures of other queer people, that for some reason if someone's sitting in a masculine pose looking more butch, or Demi Moore's posing as more butch, saying she's done with the female gaze. I'm like, so our only representations of power are if women pose as men? Like, I'm starting to have a problem with that. Like, why can't I be seen as such a powerful woman and look completely feminine? So, or other women too. Like, that's still a narrowing of representation. We all should be able to be however we want to be. And men should be able to not just seem like strong men, like whatever that definition of a strong man is, like broadening all definitions for both and all genders can only help everybody. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, well, I think it's something to, I don't know. I liked your answer. I don't know. I don't know if I really had a question. It was just something that I saw as soon as I saw it, because I think that one's in the show. The me.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, and like the way that, you found it within the text and you made it. And I don't know, there was something really sweet about that. And also that it says me. And so like, I think that's relating to like, I don't know, there's something really nice about that image in particular and how it like creates the phallus.
Yeah, that one actually cracked us up out loud. Like, so there's not, you guys can tell there's not a lot of humor in my work. My work's kind of melancholy and subtle and contemplative, but when we saw that erasure and it looked like a penis, we were like, oh my gosh, like a penis, like, did that even happen? Like, we didn't move the words on the page, it was like that, so we were just dying. But I think us being able to have fun like that was really fun, because I don't get to have that much fun in my other art.
I like it. Well, no, I think it also points to what's happening in the book throughout, like this very like masculine vibe that comes across, and like me, or look at my penis or whatever. Like, so like,
Yeah,
it's a playful way to
that.
like make fun of the book. And so I don't know. That's where I started from about this question.
Yeah, that's
So
probably my favorite piece of all. If I was going to put one up and look at it, it just cracks me up. Yeah.
well, thank you.
Thank you so much for the talk. Could we see that sinking feeling one more time as
Yeah.
a source? I want to see it again before I hazard this question.
This one?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in how the seams show and when they do and do not show, because it seems like in your reappropriation of Family of Man, there are moves that you make or actions that you take that are like outright deletions or omissions, and it's really stark, and you're telling us that something's been cut and spliced with something else. And then there are other moments where, like, even with I think in this one, and in the one with the woman holding the globe, it's more furtive, like that something's been effaced and replaced. Can you just tell us, I'm just interested in this, or am I making it up? Is my brain inventing that you might have had like a Photoshop manipulation here that extends that sand further? That is happening.
Yeah.
No, it is. I see it too, Gee, you're good.
Yeah, I just extended that sand,
Yeah.
and if you look up close, it's like not the best Photoshop.
You can tell, yeah.
Yeah, and I decided to just leave it because the double life work looks completely believable, but it felt kind of important in some way to show the cut of the hand, or it's not super Photoshop-y, like,
Right,
it's
it's
not crazy, but if you're up close, you're like, whoa, that does look like the exact same pattern, or that divot's the same. So I think showing that hand, like, at least shows that we're appropriating and not making a brand new image that never existed.
I think that's a really good one. Thank you for that, because if there's something, once you do notice it, and I don't think I would have if I hadn't seen the source, it's a little uncanny. It's like suddenly it feels flatter, or it's not making, it's not as spatially fluid as it might be, but it has a really interesting effect that I think it's very, very rich. While I'm speaking, I'm going to ask one more question. I really appreciated what you were talking about. You had a portrait of Betsy up when you were talking about having to reckon with the gaze and all the portraiture problems, and that sort of communing or communicating with Karis and Edward was a way of kind of grappling with those problems or processing that. Yes, such a powerful image and such a great way to express the challenges of doing portraiture. Can you tell us, were there outcomes from this body of work that delivered resolutions or answers to you about how to deal with these problems that are inherent to the portrait capture?
Man, I'm just endlessly fascinated by photographer-sitter relationships and the complexity and problems related to portraiture. It's really complicated, actually, I think. So those questions just keep me going, but I actually feel more free as a photographer now. I'm ready to break my own barriers, because what I realized is if you throw out Edward Weston and other white male modernists, then you're throwing out Karis, Tina Modotti, Margaret Mather, all these strong, independent women who were photographed by him. And they got to feel extremely free and fluid and different sides of themselves during the time that they were living their life in a pretty independent way that was against the grain of tradition for back then. So it just made me kind of be aware of the spins of society and who's saying what and why, and like how we hear about things, like me thinking about just queer art I see in museums, that it's mostly women who look butch are portrayed on the wall, not queer women who look feminine unless they're trans. So I don't know, those are the questions I'm thinking now, but I think those questions just keep me wanting to make pictures so I can learn from my own pictures, because sometimes I'll learn something from the picture before I can figure out what I'm thinking.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Let's go to the reception and let's thank Kelli one more time.
Where?